A carton of milk slipped from Elena's hands, the sound of it crashing to the tile floor echoing like a thunderclap in the otherwise hushed cafe. Milk fanned outward, thick and slow, as if time itself hesitated to take the next breath. She stood frozen, eyes wide, breath caught in her throat. Then came the heavy thud of footsteps from the back, deliberate, sharp, filled with intent. Carl burst through the swinging kitchen door, his face locked in a grimace, jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might snap. His gaze lasered in on Elena, and his voice cracked the silence like a whip. "If you drop one more thing," he said, loud enough for even the coffee grinder to fall silent, "I'll cut your hours to 2 shifts, just enough to starve you without letting you quit." No one moved, no one dared. In the far corner, a man sat unmoving, untouched coffee cooling beside him. His name was Jackson. Today, he went by Lou. And though he didn't blink, his eyes saw everything. Not just the spilled milk, not just the cruelty. He saw the rot beneath the polished surface, the quiet kind that spread slowly until everything that once felt alive is just a husk. He hadn't meant to get involved. Not anymore. But something about this moment, this injustice so small it could have passed unseen, pulled at a thread in his chest, one he thought had long since unraveled. As he sat there, he realized he wouldn't be walking away quietly. Later, he stared into the rear-view mirror, barely recognizing himself. Thick-rimmed glasses, a beard that didn't quite match his hair, a coat that hung too loosely on his frame, zipped all the way up as if armor could be stitched from nylon and wool. It wasn't the best disguise, but it didn't have to be. It only needed to make him unremarkable. "Lou," he whispered, testing the name again. It didn't fit, not yet, but it was safer than the one he'd abandoned. He hadn't used an alias in years, not since the company was just a name on a napkin, when he could list every barista by memory and still recall who made the best foam. Now, most wouldn't know his face. That was by design. He took in a slow breath, the kind you take when you're not walking into a room, but back into a version of yourself you thought you'd buried. Despite the chill, sweat ran down his temple. This wasn't just a check-in. He had questions, but deep down, he feared the answers might reshape everything he believed about what he'd built. He remembered the first cafe. Small, imperfect, alive. Brick walls that breathed history. A second-hand espresso machine that wheezed louder than it brewed, but had character. Jackson used to open every morning, sleeves rolled up, apron snug, hands steady with purpose. He knew every face, every story. Pete, who always tipped in coins, the woman with the dachshund who stayed until noon. The regulars weren't customers, they were neighbors. And Jackson, back then he smiled more. That was before the investors, before the policies, before the pressure to scale. Now there were 7 locations, and somehow in chasing growth, they'd lost the heartbeat. He scrolled through the latest internal report on his phone. The numbers were pristine, too pristine. Margins perfect, sales solid. But hidden in the margins, in the anonymous comments, were warnings, staff discontent, cold interactions, high turnover. The soul of the place was bleeding out through 1,000 small cuts. He recognized the pattern. Good numbers masking a culture in decay, because culture doesn't live on a spreadsheet. It lives in glances, in silences, in how often someone walks away without saying goodbye. He looked up from the screen, jaw tight, heart heavier than expected. He didn't trust perfection anymore. Not when it came with a hollow core. The mile roast on South Ash used to buzz with life. Now it buzzed with fluorescent lights. Only 3 customers sat inside, isolated islands surrounded by silence. The music still played, soft acoustic, but so faint it sounded like a memory rather than a presence. Chairs scraped the floor louder than any conversation. The sink dripped endlessly, unanswered. Jackson stepped through the door. The smell was right. Coffee, cinnamon, a hint of vanilla syrup, but the energy was wrong. He paused. The barista at the counter moved like a wind-up doll, slow and mechanical. Another one folded sleeves, staring at nothing. They didn't look up, didn't engage. It was like the soul had left, leaving only a shell behind. Then she saw him. Elena. She straightened instinctively, brushing hair behind her ear, her voice carefully measured. "Good morning. What can I get started for you?" Her name tag was crooked, her smile practiced. It hovered just below her eyes, never quite reaching them. He gave a quiet nod. "Just a black coffee." "Medium." She tapped the screen. Repeated the order. "Name?" He hesitated. The moment stretched. "Lou." From the back hallway, a shadow moved. "Carl." He glanced toward the register but didn't break stride. No nod, no acknowledgement, just a scan. And gone. Elena didn't flinch. She turned away, methodically preparing the drink. Her movements were precise, almost cautious, like someone who had learned the hard way that being invisible was the safest choice. Jackson watched in silence. Her politeness wasn't warmth, it was armor. Her posture whispered a quiet plea. Stay small, stay safe. Then she looked up, pen poised again. "Name for the cup." He took a moment, choosing the truth he could live with. Lou with an S. She scribbled it down, no questions asked. No spark of recognition, just routine. But Jackson, Lou, felt something shift inside, and he knew this wasn't just about coffee anymore. He watched her pour the coffee, each movement precise, practiced, almost too perfect. There was no wasted motion, no space for conversation, only the mechanical repetition of a routine done too often under too much pressure. She slid the cup across the counter, her voice barely above a whisper. "Medium black for Lou with an S." He accepted it with a nod and moved to a table near the far window, untouched drink in hand. But he didn't sip it. Instead, Jackson cupped the warmth between his palms, grounding himself in its fleeting heat as he observed Elena from a distance. There was nothing overtly wrong, no error in service, no harsh tone, but it was the silence, the weight of it, that unsettled him. A stillness that spoke of exhaustion, of learned quiet. He knew then, this wasn't about coffee. It hadn't been for a long time. The back door creaked open again. Carl emerged, voice already raised like a storm arriving early. "Elena!" he barked, his tone slicing through the soft hum of the room. "How many times do I have to say it? Move faster, this isn't a daycare." She flinched, not much, but enough. Her response was barely audible. "I'm sorry, I just—" "No excuses," Carl snapped, cutting her off with the ease of someone used to silencing others. "Speed it up or step out. I don't care which." A hush swept the cafe. Even the customers at the window paused, mugs frozen midair. But Jackson remained motionless, one finger tracing slow circles on the rim of his cup, his gaze locked on the scene like a silent witness unwilling to turn away. From his vantage point, he could see the hallway behind the counter. A young man emerged, wiping his hands on his jeans, his gait uneven. Marcus. The name came back to Jackson with a pang of familiarity. He moved with caution, clearly favoring his right leg. Then came Carl's voice again, this time laced with mockery. "You're done already? We don't pay for standing around." Marcus spoke low, tone apologetic. "Just need a quick break. Been on my feet since 6. Carl didn't even glance at him. "If you're that tired, don't bother coming in tomorrow. We'll cut your shift." A beat passed. Marcus said nothing, just a stiff nod before vanishing back into the kitchen like a ghost fading into walls. Jackson watched, jaw clenched. This wasn't rage. This was something colder, deeper, a kind of rot that didn't scream. It whispered, lurking in canceled shifts, in unpaid moments stolen between exhaustion and fear. Near the register, Tanya was helping an older woman with hesitant English. Her voice was warm, gentle, switching seamlessly into Spanish as she repeated the order with care. The woman smiled, grateful. But then Carl stepped in, fast, harsh. "Tanya, English. This is America. You work in English." Tanya blinked, confused. "I was just making sure I said what I said." Carl's words came down like a verdict. "Next time, send her to someone else." The smile vanished from the customer's face. She took her drink and left in silence. Tanya remained, her shoulders taut, jaw clenched, hands trembling faintly as she cleaned the counter that didn't need cleaning. Jackson's fingers curled tighter around his cup. What he saw wasn't just rudeness. It was something systematic, an erosion of dignity disguised as discipline. He didn't need a manual to recognize what he was witnessing. He just had to remember. The signs weren't loud. They never were. But they spoke in every limp, every nervous glance, every barista counting change twice out of fear rather than precision. This team wasn't just tired. They were afraid. When Jackson had first walked in, he'd been curious, trying to understand. But now, his hands were still, shoulders rigid. What he felt was anger, not fiery or theatrical, but focused and firm. The kind born from seeing something broken and realizing it had been allowed to fester. Tanya approached his table, napkin in hand. She wiped an already clean surface and murmured, "Let me know if you need anything else." Then, quieter still, "You're the first customer who's asked if I'm okay." Jackson looked up, just slightly. Tanya smiled, but it was tired, one of those smiles you learn to wear so people stop asking. Most people don't notice, or they don't want to. She didn't linger, just turned and walked back behind the counter. Jackson watched her go. The words clung to him, not because they were loud, but because they were honest. A truth buried beneath months of silence. As the mid-morning lull settled in, he stood and approached the register. Elena noticed and blinked in surprise. He kept his voice low. "Do you have 5 minutes, outside, just to talk?" She hesitated, eyes flicking toward the back where Carl had just disappeared. Jackson didn't press. "Nothing formal," he added. "Just, I'd appreciate your honesty." Her fingers tightened on the counter, knuckles pale. Then, with the smallest nod, she agreed. They slipped out through the side door into the narrow staff lot behind the building. A breeze moved through the alley, stirring loose paper and late summer leaves. Elena crossed her arms, waited. Jackson leaned against the brick wall, hands in his pockets. "I've been here all morning, watching, listening." Elena said nothing. Her silence said enough. "I think you know why," Jackson continued, voice steady. Then he asked, "Have you reported any of this?" She glanced away. "I emailed HR 2 months ago." He didn't interrupt. Let the weight of that settle. "No one replied," she said, voice thinning like worn-out thread. "Not even an automated response." Jackson's jaw tightened. "I thought maybe it didn't go through, so I sent it again. Still nothing." She wasn't crying. She wasn't breaking. But there was something deeper in her tone. Resignation. "I wasn't trying to get anyone fired. I just wanted someone to know, to feel like someone saw what was happening." She paused. "I just didn't want to feel invisible." Jackson met her gaze. "You're not," he said quietly. "Not anymore." But inside, he knew. It wasn't just Carl. It was a system that had turned away, one that no longer recognized the people who made it run. Elena unlocked her phone. "I still have the email." She scrolled, then handed him the screen. The subject line was simple: harassment concern, urgent, time-stamped, marked as read. No reply. Below it, another, same title, same content, sent again 3 days later. Still no response. Jackson stared at the message. There were no attachments, no formatting, just quiet, direct words from someone who didn't want to cause trouble but needed to be heard. Elena lowered the phone. "I just wanted to feel safe coming to work." Jackson nodded. Once. He didn't take a photo. He didn't ask for more. The silence following her words said everything. He didn't speak on the way back to his car. Just climbed in, closed the door, and sat for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop. He didn't speak on the way back to his car, just climbed in, closed the door, and sat for a long moment. Then he opened his laptop. The screen glowed to life, illuminating his face with sterile light. Rows of dashboards, HR logs, scheduling software, metrics designed to optimize, to quantify, but not to feel. Jackson sifted through the data with methodical precision. He pulled the turnover report. 3 baristas had left in the last 8 weeks. 2 had barely lasted a month. Their names weren't flagged, no alerts, just quiet exits from a place that had stopped listening. Revenue told a different story. Sales were steady, slightly above average. On paper, the cafe was healthy, but the reality was clear. Fewer people were doing more work, and no one at corporate had asked why. No one had noticed. Or worse, they had and chose not to care. He opened the HR inbox using his corporate login. It was immaculate. No active cases, no concerns flagged. Just a stream of filtered noise and automated updates. All the signs were there, but buried beneath spotless charts. Jackson leaned back in his seat. This wasn't a staffing issue. It was a visibility issue. And now that he'd seen it, he couldn't unsee it. He returned later that afternoon, stepping through the door without the disguise. No false names, no distance, just him. He spoke with Marcus first, pulling him gently aside. Has anything ever felt off? Marcus didn't miss a beat. Since day one, he said flatly. But I needed the job. Then Tanya. She folded her arms across her chest. He told me my accent made people uncomfortable, said I shouldn't smile so much, said I was too warm, whatever that means. Her tone was even, but her eyes held fire. Then came Elena. Her voice was lower now, drained of any pretense. He watches the cameras, not for safety, for control, tracks our breaks. Once, I sat for 30 seconds. He made me mop the whole back room. Jackson listened. No clipboard, no recorder. Just silence absorbing each thread, weaving a story too loud to ignore. None of them asked who he was. They already knew. He wasn't a customer anymore. Later, Marcus sat on a milk crate behind the kitchen, legs stretched out, arms hanging from his knees. Jackson crouched beside him. Has Carl ever blocked you from doing your job? Marcus let out a humorless laugh. He's locked the fridge on me before, not by accident. Said if I can't prep fast enough, I don't deserve access, so I go into service with nothing ready. Then he yells, I'm slowing everyone down. Jackson didn't react, but something behind his eyes sharpened. That way, Marcus added. He always gets to say I failed, doesn't matter what I do. It wasn't just pressure. It was design. Controlled chaos made to break people down. The kind of manipulation that never gets logged but leaves bruises anyway. Tanya leaned in the break room, arms crossed tight. There was this girl, Janelle. Sweet, quiet, always early. One customer said they couldn't understand her accent. Carl pulled her mid-shift, said she made us look unprofessional. Jackson listened, unmoving. She stayed in the bathroom for half an hour. I heard her crying. Next day she didn't come back. HR didn't even call. The silence between them was heavy. Grief disguised as memory. Then Elna. Again. She sat on the back steps, arms wrapped around her knees. Jackson joined her, not speaking, just sitting. Eventually she whispered, he told me once that if I reported him, no one would believe me. That I was just the backup girl. That people like me don't matter enough to stir anything up. Jackson turned his head, slowly. Her voice didn't waver, because she'd already accepted the pain as part of her routine. He took a breath. I need something concrete, he said. Anything I can take upstairs? She hesitated, then unlocked her phone. Scrolled. I kept this. A photo appeared on screen. Inside the walk-in fridge, crates of expired milk. A note taped to the side. Use first, don't tell. Below it, a message from a former co-worker. Carl said if we toss it, it comes out of our checks. Time-stamped. 3 months ago. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Jackson studied the screen, the date, the evidence. Some truths didn't need speeches, just clarity. That evening, Jackson sat in his car, windows cracked, the sky deepening. He pulled out a recorder, clipped in a mic, and slid an earpiece into place. No drama, just quiet resolve. He walked back into the cafe, ordered another drink, and waited. Carl emerged from the back, muttering about a schedule change. Jackson approached casually. "Quick question, what's the break policy here? Seems like some folks aren't getting one." Carl didn't miss a beat. "If they're slow, they don't need breaks. You want hours, you work." Jackson nodded, sipping his coffee. Carl kept going. Rants about lazy hires, soft workers, nobody lasting unless they were tough. The recorder caught every word. The next morning, a delivery truck backed into the alley. Jackson stood nearby, checking his phone. The young driver jumped down, opened the truck. "Double order," he said. "Text from Carl. No invoice, just cash." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "Text?" The driver held out his phone. "Bring early, pay cash, no log. Carl's name, time-stamped, frozen breakfast wraps, milk, syrup, off the books." Jackson snapped photos, message, crates, receipt. "I'll sign," Jackson offered. Driver shrugged. Jackson scribbled a name, took the receipt, then rolled the crates inside himself. No one stopped him. He logged into the internal system. No new orders, no alerts. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. He documented it all. Photos, inventory logs, discrepancies, then locked the fridge. Later, Carl approached. "Still here? We're closing." Jackson looked up, calm. Too calm. "I'll be back tomorrow," Carl scoffed. "New hangout spot?" Jackson set down the empty cup, not as a customer. He turned and walked out. No dramatic pause, no final line. Just movement. Outside, the sun dipped low. A long shadow cast behind him. Tomorrow would come, and this time, Carl wouldn't be ready. The next morning, the cafe lights flickered on just past 6. Steam hissed softly from the machine. Staff moved slow, heads low. The bell above the door rang. Jackson stepped inside. No disguise, no smile. Just purpose. Elena looked up and froze. Jackson stepped inside. No disguise, no smile, just purpose. Tanya paused mid-pour. Marcus stopped mid-mop. One by one, the staff looked up, and recognition washed over their faces. Not as Lou, not as the quiet man from the corner, but as Jackson, the founder. The name stamped on their paychecks. The face from corporate memos. He wasn't hiding anymore. Carl wasn't in yet, but even in his absence, his shadow shrank. Jackson didn't speak. He didn't need to. The way he stood said everything. The illusion had lifted. This wasn't just a visit. It was a reckoning. The room held its breath. Elena stood frozen at the pastry case, tongs still in hand, her eyes wide with disbelief. No glasses, no beard, just him. The man, behind everything. Her breath caught in her throat. Then came the familiar footsteps from the back. Carl, clipboard in hand, already forming a complaint, until he saw Jackson. He stopped cold. Color drained from his face. His eyes darted around the room as if trying to make sense of the impossible. No one had warned him. No memo had come. And now, the one man he never expected to see face to face was standing calmly, firmly, watching. Carl gripped the clipboard tighter, but his knuckles betrayed the panic. Jackson met his stare. Calm. Still. Then Jackson reached into his coat, slowly pulled out the thick-rimmed glasses, then the fake beard. He held them both in one hand like relics no longer needed. "Do you know who I am now?" His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but in the silence, it roared. Carl's mouth opened slightly. No words, just the cracking of denial. Tanya dropped a cup into the sink too hard. Marcus leaned against the wall, stunned. Elena didn't move. She barely breathed. The cafe was silent. Not from fear, but awe. The man they'd served coffee to wasn't just a witness. He was the one who built it all. And now, he was standing for them. Jackson's voice didn't rise. He simply said, "Outside." "Now." Carl hesitated, but the clipboard lowered. Jackson's tone left no room for negotiation. They stepped into the alley. Cold air, brick walls. One breath stretched too long. "I heard everything," Jackson said. "I saw everything. How you speak to them, how you run this place." Carl tried to speak, tried to find a thread to pull, but Jackson didn't give him the chance. "You don't belong in this company," Jackson said. "You're done." Carl blinked, jaw twitching. Jackson cut him off. "You will not step inside that store again." Carl's shoulders deflated. Years of assumed power vanished in a single sentence. Jackson stepped back. "Leave, now." No shouting, just finality. The silence of a door closing, for good. When Jackson stepped back inside, no one cheered, no applause, just stillness. Elena wiped her cheek quickly and turned away. Marcus accidentally dropped a cup, shattering on tile. No one flinched. Tanya looked up, her eyes met Jackson's, and she gave the smallest nod. Not surprise, not confusion, just quiet relief. They had been seen and defended. The staff gathered in the break room, huddled and unsure. Jackson stood near the counter. No clipboard, no distance, just hands in his pockets and a heavy conscience. "I owe you all an apology," he said. "I should have been here. I should have seen this sooner." No one spoke. No one needed to. "I built this place to be different," he continued. "But somewhere along the way, I let the numbers speak louder than people." Tanya looked down. Marcus leaned forward. Elena blinked fast. Jackson sighed. "I'm not here to fix everything in a day, but I'm not walking away again." It wasn't a speech. It was a promise. The next morning, Clara arrived just after dawn. Mid-30s, denim apron. Clipboard in one hand, a calm command in her stride. Jackson greeted her. "Thanks for coming." She walked the floor slowly. Not judging, just seeing. "I'm not here to bark orders," she told the team. "I'm here to keep things moving and to listen. No speeches, no buzzwords, just presence." When Marcus asked about breaks, she gave a direct answer. When Tanya asked about shift changes, Clara pulled a chair beside her, not across. Trust was in the posture. She wasn't here to save them. She was here to hold the line until they could rise on their own. Jackson set up a small table in the hallway. 2 chairs, a notepad. No formal setup, just space to be heard. One by one, they came. "What's been happening from your eyes?" he asked. Marcus spoke first, Tanya next. Elena again, with a voice a little stronger. Jackson wrote everything by hand. No laptops, no interruptions, just ink, facts, memory. By afternoon, the file was thick. He sealed it in an envelope and handed it to Clara. "Direct to compliance," he said. "No middlemen, no delays." Clara nodded. "I'll handle it." Then she came back holding a folded slip and a milk carton. No invoice, just this. Jackson opened the slip. Handwritten, no company stamp, no tracking. He turned to the carton. Neon pink sticky note. "Use first, don't tell." His stomach turned. The expiration date, 2 weeks past. He didn't speak, just photographed it. 3 angles, the note, the slip, the truth. It wasn't just emotional abuse. It was physical, tangible, served to customers who trusted the name above the door. Jackson stood in silence. But inside, something shifted. Not rage, not despair, but resolve. This time, he wasn't just changing a policy. He was reclaiming the soul of the place he built. Jackson stood in silence. But inside, something shifted. Not rage, not despair, but resolve. This time he wasn't just changing a policy. He was reclaiming the soul of the place he built. He turned slowly and walked over to Clara, his voice low but unwavering. Full inventory audit. Start now. Later that afternoon, Jackson called Elena into the office. She stepped in cautiously, a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. But Jackson greeted her with a quiet smile, not performative but genuine. "I need your help," he said simply. She blinked. "Mine?" He nodded. "We're rebuilding the internal training handbook, but this time, not from the top down, from the floor up, from people who've lived it." He slid a notebook across the desk. On the cover, a draft title, "Working with Respect, Ground-Level Practices." "I want you on the writing team. Your voice matters here." Elena looked down, her fingers brushing the edge of the notebook. She looked back up, eyes wide, voice barely audible. "You really mean that?" "I do," Jackson replied. "Starting now." For the first time in weeks, she smiled. Small, honest. Not because the storm had passed, but because someone had just handed her the pen. A handwritten sign appeared on the cafe's front door. "Closed 2 to 3 p.m. daily for team reset. Thank you for understanding." Inside, the lights stayed on. Music played low. Dishes were cleared, aprons unknotted. At the center table, Elena passed around homemade sandwiches. Marcus laughed at something Tanya said. Clara poured coffee like it was her first day behind the counter. No meetings, no tasks, just shared space. Jackson sat nearby, hands cradling a warm mug, listening more than speaking. It wasn't policy. It was rhythm. An hour carved out, not for operations, but for restoration. They weren't employees for that hour. They were people, reconnecting. And outside, even if a few customers waited, watching the sign, something more important was opening. Trust. That quiet, unspoken kind of culture you can't fake. The door chimed softly that afternoon. A man in a wheelchair rolled in slowly. He wore the same brown jacket, the same wary expression. Months ago, Carl had asked him to leave. Claimed he was blocking the aisle. Masked cruelty as policy. This time, Tanya saw him first. She stepped forward with a smile that made space. "We've got a spot ready for you." Marcus slid a table aside with care, clearing a path. Elena brought a cup of water without being asked. "No rush," she said gently. "Stay as long as you like." The man nodded, eyes glassy. He rolled into the space, exhaling softly. No apology was needed, but every action spoke one. "You're welcome here. This is your table too. And this time, we mean it." Across the cafe, Jackson stood quietly near the window. Elena was guiding a new hire, maybe 19, maybe nervous, through closing steps. Her voice was calm, measured. She pointed to the syrup labels, the storage bins, the milk dates. "Don't worry," she said gently. "You'll get it. It's more rhythm than rules." Jackson didn't interrupt. Didn't need to. He saw it in the way she moved now. Shoulders lifted, eyes assured, hands steady. She hadn't been promoted by title. But something better had happened. She'd grown into the space she was once forced to shrink inside. And now she was holding it open for someone else. Clara stepped out from the back office, clipboard in hand. "There's another store," she said. "North side, same symptoms, high turnover, no complaints filed. Just silence." Jackson looked up from his coffee, listening. "They need someone to show up," she added. He nodded once. "Go, and if there's an Elena there, listen to her, build around her." Clara smiled, tired but sure. "Got it." She turned toward the door, already calling someone on her phone. Jackson remained seated, but a different kind of energy stirred inside him. Not restlessness, readiness. The fight wasn't over. It was expanding. One fixed cafe wasn't the finish line. Not until every space under his name felt safe, felt worth walking into. Later that day, Jackson stood at the far end of the cafe. The morning rush had faded. Sunlight spilled across the tile, peaceful. On the coat rack near the door hung a new uniform, clean, pressed, waiting. Embroidered over the left chest, stitched in simple white thread. "You matter here." Jackson didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The message wasn't for him. It was for every hand that clocked in, every voice once dismissed, every silent shift endured. No music played, no final lines, just the soft hum of machines and the steady rhythm of a place beginning again. If you've ever been mistreated at work, leave a dot in the comments. We'll see you. That's all. No credits, no branding, just recognition and room to be heard. Thank you for watching.